Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat. I'm here today with Dr. Barry Sears. Dr. Barry Sears is a leading authority on the dietary control of inflammation and its resolution. He is the author of more than 50 scientific publications. He holds 14 U.S. patents in the areas of intravenous cancer drug delivery systems and the dietary regulation of hormonal responses for the treatment of cardiovascular disease. He has also written 19 books on dietary modulation or hormonal responses, including the #1 New York Times bestseller, The Zone. His books have sold more than 6 million copies in the US alone, and they have been translated into 23 different languages. Dr. Sears continues his ongoing research as the president of the nonprofit Inflammation Research Foundation in Peabody, Massachusetts. In addition to continuing research into the hormonal and genetic effects of the diet, he continues to develop innovative dietary technologies used in managing diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and neurological conditions. Today's episode with Barry Sears was incredible. And I love this quote by Barry: "Dietary control of resolution response may have a far greater impact on the future of medicine than genetic engineering." And today we learned so much from Barry, and his delivery was awesome and understandable. And like I said, I already feel healthier just from all of the lessons he taught today. One is on why inflammation is a silent killer, how to get rid of inflammation, why it is serious, and how it relates to our body fat, and how they're so closely linked. I was saying they were soul sisters. So if you can look in the mirror and grab your belly fat, it's a sign you're inflamed. So this episode is one you're going to want to perk up and take some notes. And Barry tells us how to get rid of inflammation. He also talks about glycogen and insulin and how the zone diet works to control the blood sugar, which is so important to keep you from having cravings, from being overly hungry. When you're on the zone, you could look at your watch. He said, if you eat this balanced diet, 40% protein, 30% carbs, starchy, well, he said non-starchy carbs, and 30% good fat. And you could look at your watch and say, oh, 5 hours has went by and I'm not hungry. Barry talks in length about how important omega-3 is to taking inflammation out of the body. And we go in length about fiber and leaky gut and how fiber plays a role with your microbiome and keeping you from getting leaky gut, and how you could tell if you even have it, because some people are like, how do I know if my gut's leaking? Is it going to sprout some water droplets? No. So it's kind of what we can't see in the body, but it can be measured. And he talks about how to measure if you have any of these issues. So this was so good today, you guys. It was power packed, so much great information. And he is a champ. So nice, guys. So I'm definitely going to have him back on the show again. Let me know how much you enjoy this episode. And without further ado, let's tune in to the one and only Barry Sears. I am so excited to have the great Dr. Barry Sears today on the Sisterhood of Sweat. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I don't know about the great, but I'm very happy to be on your show.
Well, you know, you are renowned, and I do have, I looked, it was on my bookshelf, the Zone Diet, and I met you in person at Beth Shaw's Yoga Fit, and I really enjoyed the way that you're very scientific, but you're kind of funny, and your approach is user friendly. So I think my audience is truly in for a treat today.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. The zone, I mean, we all hear about this, getting in the zone, like usually athletes, when they're in the zone, they're like hitting the free throws. They're, it's just that special place. So I love the title of the book. How can people get into the zone and stay in the zone?
Well, the first part's easy. The second part is harder. The first part is easy because all you need is basically a little discipline. And you need really three things. You need one eye, one hand, and one watch that works. Now, if you have those three things, you're well on your way to getting into that zone. Let me explain how. Why do you need the hand? At each meal, you divide your plate into 3 equal sections. That's why you need the eye. Now, on 1/3 of the plate, you put some protein. How much? The amount you can put on the palm of your hand. And before you get too excited, that's also the thickness of the palm of your hand. It's not that much, but you have to have that at every meal to begin to start the hormonal responses that get you into the zone. Now, what about the other 2/3 of the plate? You fill it with colorful carbohydrates. They're called fruits and vegetables. And then you add a dash, that's a small amount, a dash of fat. Now, how do you know if you've done it right? That's why you need the watch. If you balanced your plate correctly, for the next 5 hours, you'll have no hunger and peak mental acuity. Why? Because you're stabilizing blood sugar levels. And in doing so, the brain works at peak efficiency. So these are all the things we talk about the zone. Athletes talk and say, in the zone, I can do no wrong. Now, how they get to the zone, they don't have a clue. And why they leave the zone, they don't have a clue. And that's why our first subjects we used to experiment with this approach were world-class Olympic athletes, because they live in a world of inflammation by choice, by the intensity of their training. So they are always inflamed. And so our first group were really the Stanford swimmers back in 1992. And not all the swimmers bought into it. The coaches did, but not all the swimmers did. But the few swimmers who bought into it brought home 7 gold medals in the 1992 Barcelona Olympics. Pretty good for one country, extraordinary for one swimming team for one university. So that basically gave us the indication we were on the right direction, and then say, how can we apply this to other chronic disease states, which are also associated with inflammation? And what are these? Everything. So this is the reason why I developed the concept of the zone, and not so looking at it from an athletic standpoint, but from the pharmaceutical drug standpoint. We talk about a therapeutic zone for a drug. If you don't give enough, it doesn't work. You give too much, it has toxic side effects. You look forward to try to maintain a therapeutic zone. So the concept was to use food as if it were a drug, but now a more powerful drug to control hormones, to control the expression of your genes. And if you could basically balance this and maintain it, then you have really the real reason you want to be in the zone. You slow down the rate of aging. And there's no one who doesn't want to have that to happen.
Right. We all do. We all do. Well, we want to have quality of life, right? And feel young. Nobody wants to wake up and be like, I feel old today, right? We want to feel good. And so in the zone, how do we measure? Is there a way we can measure that we're in the zone? A test?
The answer is yes. And again, because the zone is about science, it's not guessing. That's why it's all about the blood. The blood will tell you if you're in the zone, and it'll also tell you if you're not in the zone. It's like being pregnant. Either you are or you aren't. And, and there are certain blood tests, very simple blood tests. Many of them can be done down in CVS, but they will tell you with remarkable precision if you're in the zone and what part of your diet you have to adjust to bring your body into that zone. And so basically, this is now really the hard part. Getting there is easy. Staying there requires discipline. And athletes have discipline. Most non-athletes don't have discipline. But again, that's why you need to have a goal. So you ask people, say, would you like to slow down the rate of aging? Well, most people say, yeah, count me in. Say, here's how you do it. But you have to basically, once you leave the zone, it might take 3 months to get into the zone, but it only takes about 2 weeks to leave the zone. So you go back to the root word diet, which comes from the Greek root, which means way of life. And this is what the zone is. It's a way of life to slow down the rate of aging.
It's basically a balanced diet, isn't it?
Just like your grandmother told you. and your grandmother, really, I took it from grandma. She said many key things. She said basically, eat 3 meals per day. And she said, at every meal, have a little protein. I'm just saying, I agree with grandma, no more, but no less than the palm of your hand. Now I'm 6'4", so my palm is a little bigger than most, but it doesn't matter. Say, no more than. The rest of, she also said, you can't leave the table until you eat all your fruits and vegetables, really all your vegetables, because they're rich in chemicals called polyphenols. These are the key chemicals that turn on a number of genetic factors. And the last thing she told you, you can't leave the house unless you have a tablespoon of cod liver oil. Now, cod liver oil has to be the world's most disgusting food, still is, but it's very rich in omega-3 fatty acids. And if you have those 3 components, balancing your plate, basically getting enough polyphenols in your diet, taking adequate levels of omega-3 fatty acids, you have the keys to the kingdom. Now, those were the good old days, about maybe 4 generations ago. Now, let's fast forward to the 21st century. The levels of omega-3 fatty acids in the typical American is incredibly pathetic. And the reason is because we're taking very low levels. Probably only 5% of what children did when they took a tablespoon of cod liver oil 3 or 4 generations ago. And as a consequence, inflammation increases in your body, and all of a sudden, everything goes to hell in a handbasket. Your health, your weight, your mental fitness, your basically cognition, everything's always so hard. Outside the zone, life is hard. Inside the zone, life is not so hard.
It's a lot easier. You feel good, you have energy, you have quality.
You squeeze everything you can out of life.
That's ideal for everyone listening, I'm sure. And I will have to confess today, Dr. Sears, I was swigging down fish oil right before I'm like, I'm reading your book, I'm taking my notes. I'm like, oh gosh, what do I have cod liver oil in the refrigerator. I'm like, oh, I need some fish oil. And so I already feel healthier.
The longest journey starts with the first step.
So great, so great. Now, inflammation is hidden. We cannot see it. That is the silent killer. How do we recognize that we have inflammation?
Well, there's 2 types. The type you can feel, that's pain. That's inflammation. We think of inflammation as something that's terrible. Actually, it protects us against a very hostile world. You have to turn it on, but you have to turn it off. That turning off is called resolution. So it's like a sink. If you turn on the handle, you got to basically turn it off, otherwise the sink's going to overflow and be on your kitchen floor. So it's really basically not turning off the inflammation completely. that is really the underlying cause of virtually every chronic disease. Now, it's a very insidious type of inflammation because it's below the perception of pain, but basically it's causing constant damage to every cell in your body, and that accelerates the aging process. So yes, you want to turn off the inflammation. Really, it's a three-step process. One, reduce inflammation. That's what the zone diet was developed to do. Second, resolve any residual inflammation. That's why you take the fish oil. And finally, you want to repair the damage caused by life itself. That's why you need the polyphenols to activate these gene factors that turn on the repair process. And so it's all these three working internally to activate ancient mechanisms in our body that allow us to heal more effectively. And when we don't, we age faster.
So what is the best way for us to get the omega-3s? What are all the ways and polyphenols?
Well, the old way of getting omega-3 fatty acids was eating fish. Just not fish, but fatty fish. And fatty fish, you count me out. But you need to eat, I'll give you 3 examples. To get enough omega-3 fatty acids, to get the same level that a tablespoon of cod liver oil would give you, you might have to eat 6 pounds of lobster per day. That's a lot of lobster and it gets very expensive. Or it could be maybe 2 pounds of tuna per day. Tuna has a problem. It's contaminated with mercury. So
Yeah.
run that out. Okay, how about salmon? Salmon's a good choice, but you'll need to have about 2 to 3 servings of salmon every day.
Oh my.
Yes, that's right. And and now we have another problem, that all fish in the world today are contaminated with certain chemicals we have put into the environment, particularly they're ones called polychlorinated biphenyls, or PCBs. The worldwide production was stopped in 2001, but these are persistent pollutants. So they're found in every fish in the world today, and the fattier the fish, the more PCBs the oil contains. So it's just not eating the omega-3 fatty acids. Now we have a problem of getting rid of the PCBs at the same time. If life was easy, it would be.
So we can't eat enough fish.
And so this is why now basically fish supplements become very useful.
Okay.
We think these are recent inventions. Actually, they're not. The ancient Romans were the first purveyors of fish oil concentrates. They used something called garum. Garum was used all throughout the Roman Empire as a sauce, like ketchup today. Emperors used it, gladiators, soldiers, the peasants. What is garum? Fermented fish intestines. It was considered vastly more valuable than olive oil. There were gigantic garum factories all throughout the empire making garum. And so this gave the Romans a unique advantage over all the other people they conquered. Now, when the fall of the Roman Empire happened, the recipe for garum, thank God, was lost. And it's only when they started bringing the first cod livers back from America to England that they basically found a new way of making fish oil. They would take the fish livers, put them in big wooden vats, let them ferment, that's a nice word of saying rot, and the oil would rise to the top. And it was considered a miracle treatment for rheumatoid arthritis.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
So that's why these things are called essential fatty acids. The body needs them, and we're going to have problems.
So like for us to get our EPAs, DHAs, like how do we take this in? Is it only in supplements? And can we screw up if we take too much omega-6, too much omega-9, and not enough omega-3?
Yep, you're getting all the nuances. God, what can it be easy? Well, yes, because we want to get enough omega-3, but we want to get a balance, a zone of omega-6 and omega-3. At the turn of the 19th century, the balance was about 2 to 1. 2 for every 2 omega-6s, you have 1 omega-3s. Now it's about 20 to 1. So we have, and the reason why, because omega-6 fatty acids are the building blocks of pro-inflammatory hormones. And so we have a lot more inflammation in our body now because of our diet than we had a century ago.
So much more.
So again, it's all about balance. It's not saying there's any magic nutrient, but it's finding that right balance. And again, finding a dietary program that also fits your philosophy. This is the beauty of the zone diet. If you're a vegan, you can practice. In fact, I wrote a whole book called The Soy Zone for vegans only. If you're omnivore, easy. If you're paleo, easy. If you're a lacto-ovo-vegetarian, easy. So it's saying, regardless of your dietary philosophy, you can balance that plate to get you into that zone.
Now, what if I'm a vegan and I don't eat fish? How do I get my omega-3?
It'll be a little difficult because the vegan source omega-3s are called alpha-linolenic acid, but they have no benefits unless they're converted to the longer chain fatty acids called EPA or DHA. Unfortunately, that's a very slow and inefficient process. So you have to consume maybe 50 to 100 times the amount of alpha-linolenic acid to get the adequate levels of EPA and DHA you need. Now, there are new genetic mutants of algae that can make EPA and DHA. So they are available. They're more expensive. But if you're a vegan, it's worth the price.
So there's a solution for us.
Yes. So again, that's why I'm saying, there's no excuses.
No, yeah, no excuses. So the zone works if I am paleo and vegan. So basically it works with any philosophy. And we're filling, I mean, how many vegetables then are we, what would be the goal for us to get in during the day for vegetables?
Well, about at least 8 servings.
Okay.
That's about 2 pounds of raw vegetables.
And so we're eating a lot of vegetables, right?
That's right.
It's hard to overeat vegetables is what I always tell my clients. I'm like, it's when you're eating these fake foods that you are never satisfied. But if you're eating the real food, it's hard to overeat. I'm probably not going to eat 2 bags of broccoli.
Well, that's true, but
at one sitting.
And that's why you spread it throughout the day like a drug.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you're right. It's very hard to overconsume vegetables. And that's one of the things that people never understood about the zone diet. It is a calorie-restricted program, but a calorie-restricted program is virtually hard to consume all the food because it starts with not how much calories you need, it's how much protein you need. That's unique to each individual. It depends on your amount of lean body mass, not your weight, and your level of activity. So individuals who are doing a lot of exercise, like Olympic athletes, need more protein than the average person. Not that much more protein, but more. And once you have the amount of protein you need in the course of the day, you split it throughout the day in equal amounts, and then that dictates how much carbohydrate you need at each meal to get the right hormonal response.
And we're talking starchy carbs, right?
No, non-starchy carbs.
Non-starchy. So non-starchy is your vegetables.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I say now we get back those 2 bags of broccoli. That's a good start, but you're not there yet. So so again, it's but you're going back to the old ways because the reason why those non-starchy vegetables are so beneficial in controlling appetite is because they contain fiber. And fiber we can't digest, but the bacteria in our guts can. And they release molecules that stop hunger. So when you have a diet that has no fiber, you have no control rod to stop hunger.
And so we have the gut bugs, basically,
Yep.
The microbiome that are eating the fiber, right?
And part of their metabolisms that make what are called short chain fatty acids that are very powerful, hormonal modulators. But if you're not feeding the bugs, guess what? You're not making the hormonal modulators to stop the hunger.
And then they also will eat your mucosal lining if you're not giving fiber, right?
Because they're hungry. And they say, if you're not going to feed us, we'll find the first food we can, which is really the mucous membrane. It sounds kind of disgusting, yet the mucous membrane is your primary defense system between you and a hostile world, not only in the gut, but also in the lungs, in the nasal passages, everywhere. And so as we have more of a fiber deficient diet, our number one defense against pathogens is being eaten away literally by the bugs because they're hungry.
And so basically they're setting you up then. If you're not giving yourself the fiber, you're setting yourself up for something called leaky gut, right?
Exactly. The metabolic term is basically a metabolic endotoxemia. It's when the gut does get leaky, and now the bacteria can actually move into the blood, and then they set off a 5-alarm fire that's saying we're under attack. And now basically all your immune system is basically called into action, thinking you're under attack, which you are under a slight attack because of a leaky gut. And that is why it leads to a wide variety of inflammatory diseases.
So interesting. And I know people are like, well, how do I know if I have leaky gut?
Well, here's an easy way. Here's an easy way. How do I know if I'm inflamed? Stand stark naked in front of a mirror. And if you look fat, you're inflamed.
There you go.
Because
so that fat and the inflammation are like this.
They're tied together. This is why, because because our fat cells are really basically tied to everything in our metabolism. And as they become the first inflamed molecules, they become a breeding ground to deliver and transmit inflammation to other organs. So the more excess body fat you carry, the more inflamed you are.
That is so key. And it's kind of close to what I was thinking. Now, so what is a cytokine storm? I've been hearing this. It's like a buzzword. People are talking about it in relation to coronavirus and inflammation. Explain what is the cytokine storm and how does it begin and how do we get rid of it?
Well, cytokines before, let's say 2 or 3 years ago, there were maybe 20 people in the world who knew what a cytokine was. Cytokines are part of the initial inflammatory response. So when you're under attack, signals are sent from the outer cell into the interior to make new proteins, cytokines, which alert all of your immune system saying, gear up, guys, we've got problems. And so cytokines are an incredibly important part of our initial inflammatory response. But if you make too many cytokines or don't turn them off, then you get a cytokine storm. What's usually the outcome of that? You die. And
that's pretty serious.
And all
the ultimate in seriousness.
All the complications we associate with COVID-19 are due to a cytokine storm. And when we've done studies in terms of patients who are on ventilators with COVID, they look at their levels of inflammation in the blood, they're incredibly high. So they say, what can I do? I say, well, what you could do is just guzzle down about, now about, half a gallon of fish oil.
Like I did. No.
But and that is not as silly as it sounds, because you can rapidly reduce these cytokine levels within a matter of days. So we have sitting before, and the data has been in the literature for many years. But if you want to reduce the cytokine storm, the fastest way is take lots of fish oil.
Perfect. So this is a huge reducer of inflammation, and our body fat is closely linked. They're like soul sisters, or so to speak. So why, when we get belly fat and we can grab that, and it's like an appendage, like a tumor, like you could just grab it and be like, what is this? Why is that so dangerous for our health?
Because the belly fat, was called the visceral fat, as opposed to the subcutaneous fat, is very, very rich in basically where most of the inflamed fat cells hang out. This is kind of the corner. And so basically they are right there, and they're right adjacent to the blood supply. So they are basically, when they're activated, they are pumping out cytokines 24/7. So the less visceral fat you have, the less cytokine factors you have in the fat cells.
Perfect. So that's a good measurement right there.
That's right. Now you say no blood test required, just a mirror that's giving you the truth information.
Naked in the mirror, the naked in the mirror test.
And this is why in COVID-19, we now know the people who are most likely to have compromised are two categories. One, elderly, and two,
elderly.
And fat.
And what was the second one?
People who are fat, obesity.
Elderly and overweight. Okay.
And they said, well, no problem. We got vaccines. Well, it turns out we have a lot of knowledge on vaccines that using influenza as an example, that people who are obese, though they make antibodies to the vaccine, their immune response is only about 1/2 the levels of a person who's non-obese, because inflammation impairs the immune system.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
And so what you have now, say, why are we having such an epidemic in America? Say, look on the streets and say, because the people are already basically prone to basically having a weak immune response because of the high levels of obesity in America.
That makes perfect sense. So being nutritionally sound, how quickly can a person, I mean, how soon should they have started eating the zone diet then? So, in regards to the coronavirus.
Well, probably a good 2 months before you get infected. But the fact is saying it works quickly. How quickly can you change the hormonal levels? We have data from Harvard Medical School published in 1999. The answer is one meal. One meal, you can dramatically alter the balance of hormones in your body. We have other data. How fast can you change the gene expression? One day. So it's like, okay, if you give me a day, in that day, we can dramatically alter the hormones in the body and change the expression of your genes. They say, well, that's impossible. Say, the body is far more complex than any drug company. And therefore, say, but we're only discovering how the complexity is and how it's controlled by the diet. It's a fascinating journey.
I'm geeking out right now. I love all this stuff. I mean, I could just eat it up. And I'm really enjoying I'm learning so much from you. I already learned in your book something I didn't know. And so I want us to kind of bring this to the audience today. Can you explain to them what a resolvent is and why the resolvent response and all that is important to us?
Well, resolvents are a term for a group of hormones derived from the omega-3 fatty acids. And what they do, they resolve inflammation. They turn it off. There is no drug that there's no hormone. These are the most powerful hormones known in the medical science. And their only one job is to turn off inflammation. And they do an incredible job if you have adequate levels of omega-3 fatty acids in the blood. If you don't, you can't make resolvents and you can't turn off inflammation.
So good, so good. Now, the resolvent, like I have never heard of that hormone before. Is this like something new? Because I'm like, I've never heard of it.
Well, the answer is yes and no.
Okay.
They were only discovered in the year 2000. And hopefully until my book came out, no one knew about them. The number of resolvent researchers in the world, you can count on the fingers of both hands. Why? They're hard to find. But as you look, now we have more sophisticated analytics. You say, oh my God, there's lots of them. And they do all these things, but I have to have enough omega-3 fatty acids in the blood to make them. No omega-3 fatty acids, no resolvents. So consider them to be the ultimate vitamin deficiency.
Wow. I found it equally interesting in your book that these miners had been trapped and were going to have like extensive, brain damage probably from, what was it, the carbon dioxide, like being in, with that. And And you basically gave him the high dose fish oil, and like it was like miraculous. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
This was the Sago mine disaster that occurred in 2006 when 13 miners were trapped in a cave-in and surrounded by carbon monoxide for 41 hours. No human being has ever lived that length of time in a carbon monoxide atmosphere. And when they broke through the mine, 12 of the miners were dead. And the one miner who was still alive, and just barely alive, they brought him out. And when they brought him out, he had heart failure, kidney failure, liver failure, and brain failure. All his white matter in the brain had been destroyed by inflammation. So I got a phone call that night by the head of the level 1 trauma center. He said, I've read your book and I've got this miner here, and I just got a call from the governor of West Virginia saying, this man must not die. Can you help me? I said, yeah, why not? So we shipped down several bottles of fish oil and started feeding the liquid fish oil through his feeding tube. And we did that at about 15 grams a day. That's a lot of fish oil. He said, oh my God, he's going to bleed to death. I said, no, he won't bleed to death for 2 reasons. One, we just finished a trial with kids with ADHD using this level. They didn't bleed to death, but their ADHD improved. And 2, we have a blood test, a little finger stick that can tell us we're taking too much. Says, I'm desperate, I'll try it. So we shipped it down there. They put the oil in this feeding tube. And after 30 days, he came out of his coma. And they took him to a rehab hospital. Now they administered the fish oil through a new high-tech device called a tablespoon. And so they would give him 2 tablespoons as high-dose fish oil. And 30 days later, he went home. His heart was normal. His kidney was normal. His liver was normal. And he gave a speech equivalent to any politician. So you saw something on CNN saying, with Anderson Cooper saying, it's a miracle. Well, it wasn't any miracle. It's high-dose fish oil. But maybe it was. Maybe we got lucky. But now it reproduces about 50 or 60 times over and over again. It can't be this simple. What's going on in your body is incredibly complex. How to activate it is incredibly simple.
Like that is like incredible, like just incredible results and a miracle like that. That is like, it's like a drug, right? It's almost like a drug.
Well, almost like a drug, but a drug that has no side effects.
Yeah.
And so that's why that's the power. But again, like a drug, you have to give a level to give an active result. If you give a placebo dose, you're going to get a placebo result.
So with the fish oil, we were also, what about Alzheimer's? How does it work with people, with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's?
Same way, because all these are inflammatory diseases, just in different organs. So with Alzheimer's, yes, if you get to an Alzheimer's patient in the early and mid stages, you can basically stabilize, if not reverse, and we did this with a group of individuals in Alzheimer's hospital. But because if you can reduce, at the early stages, resolve the inflammation, you solve the problem. Parkinson's is exactly the same, as is multiple sclerosis. And we also know now basically attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and depression. So all of these diseases respond very dramatically to high-dose fish oil. And people say, no, it can't be this simple. It is. And again, it's not that it's kind of this mystical. We publish in the world's premier journals, and they said, forget about it. We got something else working on. But it does give us something to basically say, it allows us to say, go in there, and not to say that food will replace drugs, but the more we use food like a drug, taken at the right dose, at the right time, the less drugs we need to basically take care of the residual problems. Drugs don't treat the disease, they treat the symptoms caused by the disease. What causes the disease is the blockage of the body's natural ability to heal from the food we eat. And that sounds like, that's like saying at the corner health food store will tell you. But the biochemistry of food is incredibly complex. And what I've tried to do for 40 years is say, it is complex, try to explain it and say, you can do it. And how long will it take you to find out? Probably about 7 days, if not sooner. In fact, I'll give you the timeline. Within 2 to 3 days, you aren't hungry. Why? You're stabilizing blood sugar levels. Within 7 days, you haven't lost much weight, but your clothes are fitting better because the weight you're losing is fat and visceral fat. By 14 days, you're happier. Why? You're treating depression. And by 30 days, your blood chemistry has changed dramatically.
So how does it work with, I mean, I just could attest because when I went to the conference, the Yoga Fit conference in Redondo Beach, and you were there, everybody was taking the fish oil and they were laughing. They were just laughing at everything. They were just like, so like bubbly happy that I was like, man, I need some of that. I need some of that fish oil. So how does the fish oil or the omega-3s, and how does that work to relieve the depression?
Well, remember, if you're depressed, your goals become normal. What if you're normal? Now you become super happy. So basically, it's saying that's just that continuum. So it's saying that because you're able to basically, orchestrate the neurological system, which is a complete energy hog. Most of the energy we consume has one purpose: to keep the brain going. But to keep the brain going,
the brain runs the body, right?
it requires a lot of omega-3 fatty acids. So if the engine requires omega-3 fatty acids and you're getting adequate levels, the engine's happy, you're happy, everyone smiles, and life's good.
So good, so good. What about like heart disease and cardiovascular disease? How does the zone diet fit into all of that for prevention?
Well, heart disease is another inflammatory condition. We're starting to see basically a theme here. And because all chronic diseases are a consequence of unresolved inflammation. And so in terms of heart disease, the most recent study published in New England Journal of Medicine said if you use high-dose fish oil, their idea of high dose was 4 grams per day, and everyone is using a statin. So statin was the control. And those who had the statin and the fish oil had a 25% reduction in cardiovascular events over a 4-year period. So what was that study say? If you're taking a statin and you're not taking fish oil, your cardiologist is practicing bad medicine. The statins, I'd say it lowers cholesterol. It does, but it lowers even the bad cholesterol. There's bad cholesterol and there's super bad cholesterol. It turns out it's throwing out the baby with a bathwater. You're throwing out the good cholesterol and the super bad cholesterol at the same time. There's some benefits, but add the fish oil, you get now basically a supercharged effect.
The fish oil, is it kind of like a blood thinner?
Well, at very high concentrations and how high? Probably about 20 grams a day.
Okay.
That's a lot, but the blood will tell you. So that's why we use that little finger stick test today to say, are you taking enough or too much? And now you adjust it like a carburetor of a car for the right amount to keep those levels, those balance of fatty acids in a zone. Not too high, but not too low. It's a very powerful tool.
What about all these people that are getting like blood clots, embolism, like taking the fish oil, does that kind of help in that department at all? Or am I in left field?
Hello, anybody home? Of course it does. Because the vaccines, and these are really they cause inflammation. Vaccines are not, they're a drug. They have some side effects. And to make vaccines work, you have to cause some inflammation. So the inflammation can basically cause the clotting. So you want to basically say, before I take a vaccine, I want to make sure I have adequate levels of omega-3 fatty acids in the blood to prevent clotting. If I don't, I say bad things could happen.
Yeah, perfect. That was pretty much the answer I was looking for. I mean, that, inquiring minds, I'm like, I think it should help. And I think everybody's getting an education today. Now, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask about how does all of this work for weight loss? Because a lot of people say, oh, I'm losing on the carnivore diet. I'm losing on the Atkins. I'm losing on the ketogenic diet, which is really, I thought Atkins reverse, but you know.
Well, there's a big difference between losing weight and losing fat. If you want to lose weight, here's the quickest way. I call it the Venus de Milo diet. You cut off the left arm, then you cut off the right arm. I've lost weight. So to really lose weight, you have to activate certain genetic factors. And it's what the key one is called AMPK. It basically burns fat faster. Now, that's why in very few of these studies you ever look at fat loss. Now, we did publish in the premier journal of nutrition in the world, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, back in 2006, a study comparing the zone diet to the Atkins diet. Now, in every parameter we can measure in the blood, weight loss, fat loss, everything, the zone diet was superior, except in one thing. The Atkins diet doubled the levels of inflammation in 6 weeks' time. So,
because of the meat, because the meat is acidic, too much meat, too much protein?
No, it's just basically
okay.
Because it increases the levels of inflammation. So the mediators of inflammation are called cytokines. We're increasing. And so this is why the Atkins diet that has some long-term problems. You're becoming more inflamed. So
what is the reason for that? Is it not enough vegetables? Why does the Atkins diet increase the inflammation?
Because of the fact that, yes, not enough vegetables or not enough carbohydrates. So these so-called ketone bodies, basically, they cause an inflammatory response.
Okay.
And so say between the extremes, in the old days, there's only three of us: Dean Ornish, Bob Atkins, myself, like the three tenors. And so between the two extremes, usually lies the answer, the zone. So the data was published, the best experiment ever published in terms of comparing the diets, and in the world's premier journal. And said, don't confuse me with the facts. I know I'm right. So once Bob died, say, well, we can't use the Atkins diet. We'll call it the keto diet. Yeah. And but if we go back to the Paleolithic diet, not what people think it is, but the actual academics think it is, it was virtually identical to the zone diet. And I said in my book on chapter 8, the foundation of the zone diet was based upon our best knowledge at that time of what our Paleolithic ancestors ate. It was a balance of protein to carbohydrate, but rich in omega-3 fatty acids.
So good. So much information for everybody, because I think people get so inundated with all of the different things that they get confused about what's the right thing, and if something works for weight loss, it could be temporary, right? If it's not a healthy method, they're going to gain it all right back.
Well, not always. The Venus de Milo diet always works. You won't gain weight back.
But if they're like doing this extreme, they're going to gain it back because you can't stay extreme. And that's what I like about your plan. It's balanced. It's like the easy, the palm, it's easy concept to grasp, and it balances your insulin levels. And how important for everyone out there to know what their glucose, their glycogen, and their insulin levels are, during the day.
Well, it's important, but they're fluctuating during the day. So when you take them, it's really hard to ascertain. That's why you look at basically longer track records. So one of the best ways to see if you're maintaining good levels of insulin control is the ratio of triglycerides to HDL cholesterol in your last blood test. So take the triglycerides divided by the HDL cholesterol. If it's less than 1, you're doing a good job of controlling insulin.
Perfect. Because I was doing the finger pricks and I am like, this, my finger is like, no more, please. Because you're doing the blood sugar test to see what it is when you eat, when you work out, the whole thing.
And again, but the blood sugar changes so rapidly, it doesn't give you information. That's why you're looking for longer term markers to say, am I doing a good job?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's good to do some things like that and
because again, the more knowledge you have, you can make better choices. And
right.
more importantly, the blood are like buoy markers. They say as long as you stay within the buoys, you won't run aground. But if you start to move outside the channel markers, bad things are going to happen. So think of the channel as a zone. As long as I'm inside that zone, basically life is good. Once I get outside the zone, I'm basically in no man's land. Only bad things can happen.
And just speaking for everyone out there, like that is still eating a lot of carbs and, maybe eating some junk food and they're getting the sugar spikes in relevance to hunger. Explain to them why it's so important to balance your blood sugar levels and how your diet works to do that.
Well, actually, the reason why you get hungry all starts not in the blood, but in the brain, in the hypothalamus. If the hypothalamus gets inflamed, then all the input, all the hormonal inputs coming from all parts of your body are basically disrupted. And it says, I don't know what to do. So it just eats more. So this is why basically our appetite control is so tightly basically connected to our brain control. If the brain's inflamed, you're going to gain weight. If the brain is not inflamed, you have these unique mechanisms to say, stop eating. We're raring to go. We have enough food. If you eat more food than you need, it's going to be stored as fat in the adipose tissue. And that is basically the breeding ground for inflammation.
That was really well put. And it was actually just a little different than what I was expecting you to say, which I love because that's how you learn. And oh my gosh, this has been so good today. I hope everybody out there really enjoyed hearing from Dr. Barry Sears. How can everybody get your books and reach you on social media?
Social media, that's something in the 21st century. I live in the 20th century. You can go to, I think I do actually have a Facebook page, I think. But if you can go to two sites. One would be zoneliving.com, which we talk about the nuances of the diet. And the other one is drsears.com. We go into more detail about the science. Now, as far as a book, you've read my 19th book, so that's a good starting point. That can be found at amazon.com or directly from us at zoneliving.com.
So perfect. I really enjoyed this. And I forgot to mention that you kind of got into all of this because didn't your father have heart disease?
Well, not only my father, but my grandfather and all his brothers. So it turns out that we really have a long genetic history. So my father was a world-class athlete. He was, in terms of basketball, he's on the Olympic team in 1940. Of course, there's no Olympics that year, but the fact was that he died at 53 of heart disease, as did my grandfather and his brothers. So I knew I had the same genetic predisposition. I could either live fast, die young, or do something about it. So I chose to do something about it and start to work on more, understanding what was really the underlying cause of heart disease. It was not cholesterol, it was inflammation. And that led me on a 40-year journey to understand, saying, if I can understand how to control inflammation, not by a drug, but treating food like a drug, then I could live a longer life and potentially affect the lives of millions of others, because all chronic disease comes from increased inflammation. And we have the ability in our body to turn that down and to basically live a longer and better life if we choose to.
Well, look at you. You're like the glowing health here.
Well, I guess I'm still here, so that's a good sign.
Perfect. Yes, it is. And sharp as a tack, I'll have to say. This has been so great. And I really enjoy your humor and just the way that you deliver the science so that it's easily understandable in layman's terms. It was so great. I just want to thank you so much.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity of being on your show. It was a lot of
Absolutely.
fun.
Oh, thanks. And thanks everybody for listening to this episode of the Sisterhood of Sweat.